So, as this channel has grown, and it's grown a lot, it becomes more and more difficult for me to navigate through a lot of the comment sections. To the point where I have agreed with Yvonne that it may become a tandem thing where she goes through comments, refers certain ones back to me. That's what we're looking at in the near future. But I did scour and find a comment about this. Now, I could talk about all-time rivalries. I could talk about personal rivalries. But I thought, you know what? Let's look forward to the 2017-18 season. Now, what makes a rivalry good is when teams really don't like each other. So right off the bat, you're looking at division rivals. But standings matter. So if you're going to look and say, why aren't certain teams on this list? Standings matter. The most heated games are usually ones for playoff positioning. And they can also be teams that just met in the playoffs last spring, and now they're fighting it out again for playoff positioning. So teams that had maybe a rough ride when they met each other are far more likely, in my eyes, to have a pretty rough set of games. So these are when I've got the NHL Center Ice package again this fall, and I will. That question was raised on a video too, where I was talking about the Lightning, and I talked about Braden Point, and somebody basically, it seemed like sarcastically said, "Oh, you must have had access to all the games then, if you know." I did. I watched as much hockey as I could this past season. If a game was on, I tried to watch it, even if it was two teams I couldn't stand. So when San Jose and Anaheim played against each other, and I'm staying up till 10 o'clock at night on a weeknight when I got to get up and go to work for 4 in the morning the next morning, yeah, I ask myself the question of, why am I watching? Oh, right, because I have a hockey channel and they need to know what's going on. So I wouldn't be doing this and discussing this past season and rivalries I'm looking forward to unless I've watched a lot of hockey. It would be disingenuous for me to do that. So, that being said, here are the top 10. Not all rivalries are based on standings. I always look forward to Canucks versus Flames. Every year, they hate each other. Every year, you can almost bet on a dust-up. So, even though the Canucks don't have a lineup that lends itself towards a dust-up, I'm stating that it'll happen at some point this coming season. Maybe Dorset goes back into that lineup for a night, and maybe Calgary's his target. There have been many well-documented, not as well-documented as the Tortorella incident, but there have been many documented incidents between Calgary and Vancouver over the years. So even though the Canucks are not going to make the playoffs this coming season, barring a miracle, this is a rivalry I always look forward to. Number 9. The Bruins versus the Canadians. It's not as heated as it used to be. This used to be really, really nasty. I'm thinking mid-late 80s. It was a really nasty rivalry. It's had its flare-up since. It's always a big matchup. Both of them should be in similar positions this year. I think Boston's going to stay relatively the same, and I think Montreal's going to come down a bit, and I think the games between these two teams are going to be rough this year. But they usually are. The most famous one I can think of in recent history is Milan Lucic deciding to make the handshake line a line where he'd threaten people rather than congratulate people on beating him. He got the line idea and concept mixed up. He may have thought it was a way to Dr. Phil away his problems by just admitting all of his personal issues he had with his opponents / enemies. No, that was a mess. This one I've got at number 8. This one could easily be number 1. And I'm not kidding you. Flyers versus Penguins. This depends on two things. The Flyers have to get good fast. And Claude Giroux has to get back to being Claude Giroux. Claude Giroux has to be a royal pain in the ass to play against. The Pittsburgh Penguins hated Claude Giroux in the playoffs not that long ago. And I watched Giroux get in their heads and beat them. And he has to be that Claude Giroux this season for the Flyers to get back. Their defense is going to be fine. I think their goaltending will be adequate. it's going to come down to what Giroux can or cannot do in games like against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Is the Battle of Pennsylvania. Of course it's going to be big. Number 7. I'm just going to go ahead and just put the state, California. San Jose, LA, Anaheim. Any two of those 3 teams against each other. It's going to be a hate fest. It's going to be rough. The Kings are a big team. The Ducks are a big team. There's some brawn to be had in San Jose as well in terms of the size. And those 3 teams all collectively can't stand one another. So anytime those teams play against each other, even though I'm not a fan of any of those 3 teams, it's usually fun to watch. Because their dislike for one another comes out pretty quickly. Number 6. This could also go to number 1. This could go to number 1 if they're fighting for first place. Or just for that last playoff spot. If the Flames and the Oilers are playing each other down the stretch, and they're both, looking at one wild card spot for between the 2 of them, it could be huge. If they're fighting for first place. But either way, wow. Flames and Oilers is always fantastic. The Battle of Alberta is finally relevant again. Took a long time, but the Battle of Alberta is one of those things. And it could go to number 1 on this list. Number 5. Oh, I'm writing it in orange. I didn't mean to. I went with the wrong end of the marker. Hopefully this is visible. Let's see. Close enough. Leafs versus Canadiens. Toronto is always on television. They have the largest amount of fans, the largest population center, and CBC makes sure that as many of their games as possible get in Hockey Night in Canada, which usually means games against the Canadiens are on Saturdays. I haven't looked over the schedule to see how that's going to work out for this coming season, but I'm willing to bet at least 3 games between these 2 teams are on a Saturday. And now that both teams are good, and again, they're in a similar position. The Leafs are coming up, and I don't think the Leafs are going to fall back. This could be one hell of a rough ride again for both teams. Now, the Penguins are going to be featured a few times from here, because they're the Stanley Cup champions. Teams are going to take shots at them, and the Senators are not easily going to forget how close they came to knocking off the Pittsburgh Penguins. And for the Penguins, this is going to be rough, because these teams, by the end of that series, they really couldn't stand each other. And I'm guessing any game between those 2 teams is going to be pretty brutal. Almost as brutal as this. Almost put Penguins again. Preds versus Ducks. I will be tuning into any game between Nashville and Anaheim this year. Again, based on last year's playoffs. Remember, for the teams that are contenders, there hasn't been a whole lot of turnover for playoffs. Since the playoffs. So, these lineups that face each other are going to be relatively intact. And the Preds and the Ducks, I can't see there being any happy feelings between the 2. And I could see fight-filled contests between those 2 teams. That's going to be some fun hockey. Now I can put Penguins again. And there's been much written about the demise and much said about the demise of the Capitals. But let us not forget that in that second round series, there was a lot of dirty play going on. There were a lot of messy plays. And by the end of that series, there was a lot of bumps and bruises for both teams. Oh, and they have almost 30 years of a history between them in which the Penguins have kind of owned the Capitals. The Capitals should come into this season kind of ornery. And with the amount of cap issues they have, they may have to dress more grit guys than they normally would. And already the Penguins have stated they're going to have more grit guys than normal. So if you're going to look at a statement game where Pittsburgh's going to say, we're not getting run over again, look for the first meeting they have with the Capitals. Look for that first meeting for them to send a message to the entire NHL who are going to be watching. This is not the same Penguins team. I would watch for Ryan Reeves to square off against probably 2 opponents. I think Reeves and Tom Wilson, I think that's a given. It's whether it's in the first 5 minutes or where in that first period, because both teams have a lot to prove this year. Pittsburgh wants to prove they're still at the top, and they want to show a little bit of toughness, a little bit of grit to take some of that physical pressure off Sidney Crosby. To try to make it so teams are a lot less likely to high stick Crosby, cross-check him, and all of these things that go on, because you're worried about somebody coming over those boards who's going to turn your lights out. We'll see whether or not that works. And number 1, oh God, I'm orange again. Number 1 is the Ducks versus the Oilers. These double-ended markers. Apparently every 4 or 5, I'm going to get it backwards. Ducks versus Oilers for me is, I really think this season is going to be, now they met in the playoffs, but it's not just that. The Ducks are still, I think, going to be the toughest team in the Pacific. Both in terms of physically, mentally, I think they've got it. I'm not, I've never been a big fan of Kessler, but Kessler's one of the best defensive forwards in the league, and in terms of getting in a guy's head, he's one of the best. The Oilers are on their way to being legitimate. You can have one good run and have fans go, yeah, but can they do it again? So now the Oilers have to do it again. And they have to go through the Ducks to do it. I mean, the Kings are going to challenge for a playoff spot. The Sharks are still going to be good. Calgary is still going to be a rival of the Oilers just down the highway. But the Ducks, after that series they had, and the fact that I think going into next season, they're still just as close. There was a hair that separated them at the end of the season in 16-17, and I think we're still going to be there in 17-18. And I think there's going to be some amazing battles right away, because people know now how good the Oilers are, and we've known for a while how good the Ducks are, and those clashes are going to be epic. So again, I'm aware I left certain teams off. I'm aware I left certain rivalries out. I went over the entire NHL. I went through the list. These are the rivalries these are the games that I'm going to look at and say, I have to see that tonight. It doesn't mean I'm not going to want to watch Lightning games. It just means I don't see, at this point, those rivalry games going into the season. Maybe Tampa has a huge rivalry with the Bruins or the Leafs. I thought about the Lightning and the Leafs and thought, what if they're close again? What if they're fighting for that last playoff spot? But these, in my eyes, are still pretty damn solid matchups. These are the ones that I think are going to draw ratings, especially Leafs Canadians, Penguins Capitals south of the border. And I honestly probably could have put the Chicago Blackhawks on the left-hand side and 10 different teams on the right-hand side that hate Chicago. And I could have done it with Pittsburgh too. There are a lot of really solid rivalries in the NHL. So let me know what your favorite rivalry is in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And again, this is just one man's opinion. Let me know yours, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.